Hello and welcome to Anmol Mehta Super 20 IAS. So we are going to start with another lecture of geography of our Himachal Mahabandara course. So today we are going to study about major and minor ocean relief features. So first of all, what is the ocean? While there is only one global ocean, the vast body of water that covers 71% of Earth is geographically divided into distinct named regions. The boundaries between these regions have evolved over time for a variety of historical, cultural, geographical and scientific reasons. So historically, चार ocean थे, the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian and Arctic Ocean. But after some time, there was a new ocean that was recognized, that is the Antarctic Ocean as the fifth ocean. Ocean relief features. So the oceans, they merge so naturally into one another that it is hard to demarcate them. The geographers have divided the oceanic part of the earth into 5 oceans, जो अभी हमने discuss किए, Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, Southern and Arctic Ocean. The various seas, bays, gulfs and other inlets are parts of the 4 large oceans. जो major portion है of the ocean floor, that is found between 3 to 6 kilometers below the sea level. The floors of the oceans वो rugged हैं with the world's largest mountain ranges, deepest trenches and the largest plains. These features are formed like those of the continents by the factors of tectonic, volcanic and depositional processes जो कि हमने पिछले lectures में पढ़ा है. The ocean floor, we are going to study them one by one. The ocean floors can be divided into 4 major divisions. The first is the continental shelf, the second is the continental slope, the third is the deep sea plain and the fourth is oceanic deeps. इसके अलावा, these divisions, there are also major and minor relief features in the ocean floors like ridges, hills, sea mounts, gorges, trenches, canyons, etc. So first of all, see the picture. It gives an overview of what are the ocean relief features. The first is the continental shelf. The continental shelf ये क्या है? Is the extended margin of each continent occupied by relatively shallow seas and gulfs. It is the shallowest part of the ocean, showing an average gradient of 1 degree or less. The shelf typically ends at very steep slope called the shelf break. So you can see in the picture what is a continental shelf. The next is continental slope. The continental slope connects the continental shelf and the ocean basins. It begins where the bottom of the continental shelf sharply drops off into a steep slope. The gradient of the slope region varies between 2 to 5 degrees. And canyons and trenches वो observe किए जाते हैं इस region में. The next is continental rise. जो continental slope है that gradually loses its steepness with depth. When the slope reaches a level of 0.5 degree and 1 degree, it is referred to as the continental rise. With increasing depth, the rise becomes virtually flat and merges with the abyssal plain. Next is deep sea plain or abyssal plain. तो क्या है? It is an underwater plain on the deep ocean floor. ये कहाँ पाया जाता है? At the depth between 3000 meters to 6000 meters. It has extensive submarine plateaus, ridges, trenches, beams, and oceanic islands that rise above sea level in the midst of oceans. So, इसके examples क्या हैं? The Azores, Ascension Island. These plains are covered with fine-grained sediments like clay and silt. Next is oceanic deeps or trenches. Oceanic trenches are steep depressions in the deepest part of the ocean. These trenches are relatively steep-sided, narrow basins. These areas are the deepest part of the oceans. So the example क्या है? The Marina Trench of the Guam Islands in the Pacific Ocean is the deepest trench with a depth of more than 11 kilometers. So some minor oceanic relief features like ridges, hills, sea mounts, gorges, trenches, canyons, fractured zone, island arcs, atolls, coral reefs, submerged volcanoes, and sea scarps. So what is a mid-oceanic ridge? A mid-oceanic ridge is composed of two chains of mountains separated by a large depression. The mountain ranges can have peaks as high as 2500 meters and some even reach above the ocean surface. तो इसका एग्जाम्पल क्या है? आइसलैंड is a part of mid-Atlantic ridge. Seamount, it is a mountain with pointed summits rising from the sea floor that does not reach the surface of the ocean. Seamounts are volcanic in origin. These can be 3000 to 4500 meters tall. The Emperor Seamount, an extension of the Hawaiian island in the Pacific Ocean, is a good example for seamount. The next is submarine canyons. ये क्या है? These are deep valleys, some comparable to the Grand Canyon of the Colorado River. They are sometimes found cutting across the continental shelves and slopes, often extended from the mouth of large rivers. तो इसका best example क्या है? The Hudson Canyon is the best known submarine canyon in the world. Next is goats. It's a flat-topped seamount. They show evidence of gradual subsidence through stages to become flat-topped submerged mountains. It is estimated that more than 10,000 seamounts and goats exist in the Pacific Ocean alone. So you can see what is a goat here. Next, we're going to talk about atoll. Atoll, these are low islands found in the tropical oceans consisting of coral reefs surrounding a central depression. It may be a part of sea, lagoon, or sometimes form enclosing a body of fresh, brackish, or highly saline water. The next is bank. ये क्या है? These are marine features formed as a result of erosional and depositional activity. A bank is a flat-topped elevation located in the continental margins. The depth of water here is shallow, but enough for navigational purposes. The Dogger Bank is in the North Sea and the Grand Bank in the northwestern Atlantic. Newfoundland are some of the famous examples. The banks are the site of some of the most productive fisheries of the world. So you can see what is the atoll here. Next is shoal. A shoal is a detached elevation with shallow depths. Since they project out of water with moderate heights, they are dangerous for navigation. Reef. So you must have heard about what are coral reefs. A reef is a predominantly organic deposit made by living or dead organisms that form a mound or rocky elevation like a ridge. Coral reefs are a characteristic feature of the Pacific Ocean where they are associated with seamounts and goats. The largest reef in the world is found off the Queensland coast of Australia. Since the reefs may extend above the surface, they are generally dangerous for navigation. So you can see what is a coral reef here. Next are ocean waves and movements of ocean water. What are ocean waves? The ocean waves क्या है? They are undulatory motion of water surface. Waves क्या है? Nothing but the oscillatory movements that result in the rise and fall of the water surface. Waves are a kind of horizontal movement of ocean water. They are actually the energy, not the water as such, which moves across the ocean surface. This energy for the waves is provided by the wind. So you can see in the picture how a wave moves. So what are different parts of wave? The highest point of a wave is called crest and the lowest point is called a trough. Wave height, it is the perpendicular distance from the bottom of the trough to the top of the crest. Wave amplitude, 1/2 of a wave height. Wave period, it is merely the time interval between two successive wave crests or troughs. Wavelength, it is the horizontal distance between two successive crests. Wave speed, it is the rate at which the wave moves. And frequency is the number of complete waves that occur over a given period of time. So most of the waves present on the ocean surface are wind generated waves. So friction from the wind moving over the water causes the water to move along with the wind. If the wind speed is high enough, the water begin to pile up and a wave is formed. तो जैसे जैसे velocity increase होती है, wavelength, wave period and height भी increase होती जाएगी. What are ocean currents? तो ocean current ये है continuous journal movement of ocean water एक ही specific direction में. As an analogy, you can perceive it as river flowing over the ocean surface. So about 10% of the water in the world's ocean is involved in the surface currents only. Most surface currents move water in the horizontal and vertical direction in the top layer above the thermocline. That is the layer where temperature changes steeply. The water beneath the thermocline also circulates, but the movement is very slow. Ocean currents characterize कर सकते हैं as warm ocean current and cold ocean current. Warm ocean currents और cold ocean currents इसलिए नहीं क्योंकि वो अपने temperatures पे depend करते हैं. It is because of the impact of the destination region. A current that moves towards the pole in both hemispheres is a warm current because it is carrying warm water from lower latitudes to upper latitudes. On contrary, a current coming from upper latitudes towards the tropic is a cold current. So winds, water, density and tides all drive ocean currents. Coastal and sea floor features influence their location, direction and speed. Earth's rotation results in the Coriolis effect, which also influences the ocean currents. So large-scale surface ocean currents are driven by global wind systems that are fueled by energy from the sun. These currents transfer heat from the tropics to the polar region, influencing local and global climate. In the northern hemisphere, the winds blow from east to west just above the equator. The winds pull surface water with them, creating currents. As these currents flow westward, the Coriolis effect, that is a force that results from the rotation of Earth, deflects them. The current then bends to the right, heading north. At about 30° north latitude, a different set of winds, the westerlies, push the currents back to the east, producing a closed clockwise loop. The same thing happens below the equator in the southern hemisphere, except here the Coriolis effect bends surface currents to the left, producing a counterclockwise loop. Large rotating currents that start near the equator are called subtropical gyres. So this was the phenomena of ocean currents. Next are tides. The periodic short-term rise and fall in the sea level is known as tide. It is produced due to the gravitational interaction of Earth, Sun and Moon. Since the Moon is closer to Earth, it has pronounced influence on the tides. Rotation of Earth also aids the tides. The Moon's gravitational pull to an extent and to a lesser extent, the Sun's gravitational are the major causes for the occurrence of tides. Another factor is the centrifugal force that acts opposite to the gravitational pull of the Earth. Tides occur due to the balance between all these forces. When the highest part or the crest of the wave reaches a particular location, high tide occurs. Low tide corresponds to the lowest part of the wave or its trough. The difference in the height between the high tide and the low tide is called the tidal range. The highest tide in the world occurs in the Bay of Fundy, that is in Canada. The highest tide in India is recorded at Okha in Gujarat. You can see the Bay of Fundy, it is near Nova Scotia in Canada. Tide changes proceed via the following stages. So number 1, sea level rises over several hours, covering the intertidal zone, that is flood tide. The water rises to its highest level, reaching high tide. Sea level falls over several hours, revealing the intertidal zone, that is ebb tide, and the water stops falling, reaching low tide. So different type of tides. Tide may vary in their frequency, direction, and movement from place to place and from time to time. Tides may be grouped into various types based on their frequency of occurrence in one day or 24 hours or based on their height. So tides based on frequency are semi-diurnal tide, and mixed tide. The most common tidal pattern featuring 2 high tides and 2 low tides each day. The successive high or low tides are approximate of the same height, that is semi-diurnal tide. Next is diurnal tide. There is only one high tide and one low tide during each day. The successive high and low tides are approximately of the same height. The next is mixed tide. Tides having variations in height are known as mixed tides. These tides generally occur over the west coast of North America and on many islands of the Pacific Ocean. Tides based on the sun, moon, and the earth's position. The height of rising water varies appreciably depending upon the position of sun and moon with respect to earth. So two different types of tides, that are spring tides and neap tides, come under this category. The first is spring tide. तो इसमें क्या है, the position of both sun and moon है in relation to the earth has a direct bearing on tide height. When the sun, moon and earth ये जब एक straight line में होते हैं, the height of the tide will be higher. These are called spring tides and they occur twice a month, one on full moon period and another during the new moon period. Next is neap tides. So when the moon is at the first quarter or third quarter, the sun and moon are separated by 90 degrees when viewed from earth, and the solar tidal force partially cancel the moons. The moon's attraction, though more than twice as strong as sun's, is diminished by the counteracting force of the sun's gravitational pull. At these points in the lunar cycle, the tides range is at its minimum. This is called the neap tides or the neaps. Neap is an Anglo-Saxon word meaning without the power. Normally, there is a 7-day interval between the spring tides and the neap tides. Like spring tides, these tides occur twice a month. The magnitude of tides based on perigee and apogee of moon. So once in a month, when the moon's orbit is closest to the earth, that is known as perigee, unusually high and low tides occur. During this time, the tidal range is greater than the normal. 2 weeks later, when the moon is farthest from the earth, that is known as apogee, the moon's gravitational force is limited and the tidal ranges are less than their average heights. Magnitude of tides based on perigee and apogee of earth. So when the earth is closest to the sun, that is known as perihelion, that is around 3rd January each year, tidal ranges are also much greater, with unusually high and unusually low tides. When the earth is farthest from the sun, that is known as aphelion, around 4th July each year, tidal ranges are much less than average. Apogee क्या है? It's the point in an orbit around the earth that is farthest from the earth. And aphelion is the point in the elliptical orbit of a planet, comet, etc., where it is farthest from the sun. So some major C's of the word जो बहुत जरूरी है याद करने, we are going to study them one by one. The first is Arabian Sea. So every Indian knows what is Arabian Sea and where it is situated. The Arabian Sea is a region of northern Indian Ocean, bounded on the north by Pakistan, Iran, and the Gulf of Oman. On the west, Gulf of Aden, Guadalquivir Channel, and the Arabian Peninsula. On the southeast, the Laccadive Sea, and the southwest, Somali Sea. The next is Andaman Sea, that is a marginal sea on the northeastern Indian Ocean, bounded by the coastlines of Myanmar and Thailand along the Gulf of Martaban and west side of the Malay Peninsula and separated from the Bay of Bengal to its west by the Andaman Islands and the Nicobar Islands. The next is South China Sea. तो यहाँ पे कौन सी important places हैं like China, Vietnam, Hainan, Malaysia and Philippines. So China is involved in disputes with many countries because of the South China Sea. तो places कौन सी हैं इसकी dispute की? The Paracel, Scarborough Shoal and the Spratly Islands. The next is East China Sea. So it is a marginal sea of Western Pacific Ocean located directly offshore from East China. The east of the sea, Japanese island of Kyushu and Ryukyu Island. The south, that is the South China Sea, and to the west is the Asian continent. The next is Sea of Okhotsk. The Sea of Okhotsk is a marginal sea of the Western Pacific Ocean. It is located between Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula on the east, the Kuril Island on the southeast, Japan's island of Hokkaido on the south, the island of Sakhalin along the west, and the stretch of eastern Siberian coast along the west and the north. The next is Adriatic Sea. The Adriatic Sea is a part of Mediterranean Sea positioned between the eastern coastline of Italy and countries of Balkan Peninsula from Slovenia, south through Croatia, Montenegro and to Albania. The next is the Dalmatian coastline. So Dalmatia is one of the historical regions of Croatia alongside Croatia proper, Slovenia and Istria. So Dalmatia is a narrow belt of the east shore of the Adriatic Sea stretching from the island of Rab in the north to the Bay of Kotor in the south. The next is Black Sea. The Black Sea is an island sea located between far southeastern Europe and far western edges of the continent of Asia and country of Turkey. It is bordered by Turkey and by Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, Russia and Georgia. The next is the Caspian Sea. The Caspian Sea is an enclosed body of water between Asia and Europe. It is bordered by Iran, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan and Russia. The next is the Mediterranean Sea, that is the most important. The Mediterranean Sea is a sea connected to the Atlantic Ocean surrounded by a Mediterranean basin and almost completely enclosed by land. On the north by southern Europe and Anatolia, and on the south by North Africa, and on the east by the Levant. So you please, if you know which are the countries that surround this Mediterranean Sea, please comment down. The next is the Sargasso Sea. So it is bounded on the west by the Gulf Stream, north by the North Atlantic Current, east by the Canary Current, and south by the North Atlantic Equatorial Current. It is the only sea on earth which has no coastline. The next is Caribbean Sea. The Caribbean Sea is bordered by Venezuela, Colombia, and Panama to the south, Central American countries, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Honduras, and Belize on the west, with the Greater Antilles, Cuba, Jamaica, and the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico on the north, and the Lesser Antilles on the east. Next is Gulf of Mexico. It is connected to the Atlantic Ocean by the Straits of Florida, running between the peninsula of Florida and the island of Cuba, and to the Caribbean Sea by the Yucatan Channel, which runs between the Yucatan Peninsula and Cuba. Next is the Red Sea. So the connection to the ocean is in the south through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Gulf of Aden. To the north lie the Sinai Peninsula, the Gulf of Aqaba, and the Gulf of Suez, that is leading to the Suez Canal. The Aegean Sea is an elongated bay of the Mediterranean Sea south of the Adriatic Sea. It is bounded by southern Italy to the west, southern Albania to the north, and the west coast of Greece. The next is Coral Sea. The Coral Sea takes its name from its coral formations of the Great Barrier Reef, the largest known reef system in the world. Next is Tasman Sea. Tasman Sea is a marginal sea of South Pacific Ocean, situated between Australia and New Zealand. The British explorer Captain James Cook later extensively navigated the Tasman Sea in the 1700s as a part of his first voyage of exploration. So some marginal seas of the Arctic Ocean are Barents Sea and the Irish Sea. The marginal sea of the Mediterranean Sea are Adriatic Sea and Aegean Sea. Marginal seas of the Atlantic Ocean, Argentine Sea, Caribbean Sea, English Channel, Gulf of Mexico, Hudson Bay, Irish Sea, Labrador Sea, Mediterranean Sea, North Sea, Norwegian Sea, and the Scotia Sea. Marginal seas of the Indian Ocean, Andaman Sea, Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, Java Sea, Persian Gulf, Red Sea, and Sea of Zans. Marginal seas of the Pacific Ocean, Bering Sea, Celeb Sea, Coral Sea, East China Sea, Philippine Sea, Sea of Japan, Sea of Okhotsk, South China Sea, Tasman Sea, and Yellow Sea. So I hope you guys like the video. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you have any doubts, please comment down. Subscribe to our channel for more videos. Thank you so much for watching and happy learning.